Rich Girl, Poor Girl, written by Val Wood, read by Anne Dover. The moral right of the author has been asserted. Chapter 1. In the last few days of the year 1860, there was thick ice in the Humber, and for the following 2 weeks, navigation was hazardous. The conditions were unprecedented, the locals said, and all agreed that the whole year had been an extremely difficult one. There had been many fires in the old town of Hull that year, but the worst had been in March, when, at 2 o'clock one morning, a raging fire tore through a wine merchant's warehouse near the ancient Holy Trinity Church, completely destroying the building. Casks burned, and bottles of fine wine shattered, and alcoholic vapours shrouded the street. In October, the steamer Arctic was wrecked with the loss of 6 lives, and it was the general opinion that it would be a relief to see the end of the year. Surely things could not get much worse. On the evening of the 23rd of December, it was snowing in the poorer part of Hull. The pristine flakes settled as grey sludge across the dismal courts and alleyways, adding an austere and shadowy gloom to the misery within the dilapidated buildings which housed the malnourished, the sick, and the despairing.
"Fetch Granny Walters,"
Polly's mother groaned.
"and tell her to be quick."
16-year-old Polly stared wide-eyed at her mother.
"You never up spout, Ma. You said there'd be no more after last time." "Never mind what I said," her mother gasped. "How to stop 'em? That'd be a fine thing. Now go, for I bleed to death." "That Sonny Blake, or whoever it was'll kill you," Polly shouted as she grabbed a worn shawl and headed for the door. "There'll be death of you." "Tell me summat I don't know, girl," her mother muttered. She staggered towards a metal pail, and retched until her insides felt as if they were on fire. Her throat was raw, and her eyes were burning hot slits in her pinched and pale face. Across on the other side of town, it was also snowing. The feather-like flakes drifted down and landed so gently that they piled in soft layers, until it seemed that a flimsy white blanket had transformed the elegant houses into a mystical fantasy scene. "Mamma?" Rosalie gazed out of the second-floor window onto the street below. "It's still snowing. Perhaps we'll have a white Christmas like the ones on the Christmas cards." "Yes, perhaps we will." Behind her daughter's back, her mother grimaced in pain. "Rosalie, dear, ring for Martha, and ask her to send for Mrs. Dawson." Rosalie turned to her mother and took an open-mouthed, shallow breath. Mrs. Dawson had been coming regularly to see her mother. Rosalie knew perfectly well why she came, but was not expected to comment on the reason, and did not. She pulled the bell rope, and with gentle concern asked her mother if she wouldn't like to sit down, as she looked a little tired. Her mother shook her head. "I'd rather walk about," she murmured. "I feel rather restless." "Oh," Rosalie thought in some trepidation, "an early sign. Restlessness with an urge to nest build." Some weeks before, whilst searching for a book to while away a wet afternoon, she had found on the top shelf in her father's study a volume packed with information which fully explained her mother's present indisposition. Rosalie's father was a military man and not due home for several months, so she had taken the book to her room and completed her education regarding the mysteries of the human body and the union of a man and a woman, which had hitherto been an enigma cloaked in secrecy. When Martha knocked, Rosalie met her at the door and asked her to fetch Mrs. Dawson straight away. 15 minutes later, Mrs. Dawson was directing Mrs. Kingston to retire to her room and telling Rosalie to ask Martha to bring up extra sheets and blankets and boil a pan of water. "Mamma," Rosalie whispered, "is it not too early?"
Sample complete. Ready to continue?